Ferrari breaks the silence in Saudi Arabia. Leclerc returns to the podium and Hamilton continues to fight. Are we witnessing a true rebirth of the prancing horse? I'll tell you all about it now. The pressure was suffocating. Scuderia Ferrari arrived in Saudi Arabia without having stepped onto the podium so far this season. With an increasingly impatient fan base and a grid dominated by McLaren and Red Bull, the Italians knew that the Jeddah Grand Prix could mark a turning point. And so it did. Charles Leclerc, with fine, precise, and aggressive driving when necessary, delivered a solid performance from the opening lap. He held firm among the leaders, withstood pressure from Lando Norris in the final stage, and secured third place. It wasn't just another podium finish. It was a cry of hope for a team that had been receiving criticism for its lack of competitiveness. That third place wasn't celebrated as a standalone trophy, but as a sign that something at Maranello is starting to click. The context wasn't insignificant. Jeddah Street Circuit is one of the fastest and most technical on the calendar. It requires pinpoint precision, perfect balance, and impeccable race strategy. Ferrari had failed at all of these in previous races. But this time things were different. From the first free practice sessions, a different attitude was evident. More focus, more cohesion, more confidence. While Leclerc shone, the other side of the garage showed the opposite side of the team. Lewis Hamilton, still adapting to the SF25, once again demonstrated his struggle to connect with a car that doesn't behave like the Mercedes he dominated for years. He finished 7th, far from his teammates' pace, and visibly frustrated at not being able to extract what he himself believes he still has to offer. But despite this internal gap, Leclerc's podium represents a crucial moment for Ferrari. It's the validation of weeks of technical work, changes in setup philosophy, and a driver who, despite the pressure, continues to push to the limit. They may still be far from McLaren and Red Bull in terms of pure performance, but in Jeddah they made it clear they aren't willing to give up so easily. During the first races of the 2025 season, the SF25 seemed to be an extension of past mistakes. Grip issues, uneven cornering, and a clear disconnect between the car and its drivers. Frustration wasn't just palpable in the paddock. It also seeped into every statement made by the drivers. But something changed in Saudi Arabia. After the in-depth performance analysis in Bahrain, Ferrari decided to change course. The technical approach changed, and with it, the car's performance. The SF25 arrived in Jeddah with a less extreme configuration, abandoning the conceptual rigidity that had limited it in the first Grand Prix. This decision was noticeable and very noticeable. The key factors were the aerodynamic and suspension settings. The team led by Diego Tondi understood that to perform on a circuit like Jeddah, they needed efficiency, stability, and fluidity. The softer asphalt allowed the suspension to be stiffened without penalizing handling, which in turn allowed the car's ride height to be slightly lowered. This increased effective downforce without compromising traction. It was a high-risk technical move, but one executed with precision. Furthermore, the SF25 retained the floor upgrades introduced in Bahrain. While they didn't make a clear difference there, they certainly proved useful in Jeddah. Aerodynamic flow improved, and with it, consistency in fast corners. Ferrari was not only looking for top speed, but also balance, something they hadn't achieved so far. However, the car is still far from perfect. Understeer remains a concern in low-speed corners, and the lack of rear axle rotation limits the car's attack potential in qualifying. But this time, the team showed signs of real progress. This is no longer a team trying out random solutions, but a team beginning to understand the nature of its car. Performance in Saudi Arabia cannot be separated from the technical context. Jeddah favors stable cars with good aerodynamic efficiency and responsiveness in connected corners. The SF25, as presented on that track, met those requirements. And although there is still a long way to go, the result was a clear sign. Ferrari has found a foundation on which to build its recovery. The next challenge will be to demonstrate that this progress is not an isolated case, but part of an upward trend. Because if the SF25 managed to adapt to Jeddah, it must now demonstrate that it can also dominate on less favorable circuits. And that is where we will see whether this technical redemption is real or simply a passing illusion. Inside the Ferrari garage, the gap between Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton is becoming impossible to ignore. It's not just about lap times or finishing positions. It's a matter of connection with the car, confidence, and how each driver interprets and executes their role with the SF25. And in that area, Leclerc has a significant advantage. Since free practice in Jeddah, the Monégasque driver has shown a familiarity with the car that Lewis has yet to achieve. Leclerc was able to squeeze every phase of the lap, found pace in the second stint on medium tires, and knew how to handle the pressure from Lando Norris, who gave him no respite. His driving was clinical, strategic, aggressive when necessary, but always within control. Leclerc has learned to live with the SF25's flaws. In qualifying, despite complaining of alternating understeer and oversteer, he managed to place fourth, less than 4/10 off pole. He himself expressed it clearly. His lap was good, he gave it his all, but the car still doesn't allow him to stay with the front runners. Even so, his performance was enough to establish himself as the best of the rest, behind McLaren and Red Bull. Hamilton, on the other hand, is still searching for answers. He finished 7th in both qualifying and the race, more than 0.6 of a second ahead of Leclerc in qualifying and more than 30 seconds in the race. His post-GP analysis was revealing. He acknowledged that he's going back to the drawing board, reprogramming years of habits acquired at Mercedes. Technically, he's in the process of unlearning. The SF25 demands a driving style that he hasn't yet mastered. The disconnect between Hamilton and the Ferrari isn't just technical. It's also emotional. While Leclerc conveys a sense of stability within the technical chaos that still surrounds the team, Lewis reflects uncertainty. He has flashes of competitiveness but not consistency. There are times when he seems to take a step forward, only to regress the next day. In Jeddah, he felt he'd found something in Bahrain, but upon arriving at the Saudi Arabian circuit, that progress vanished. The contrast is also strategic. Leclerc better understands when to push, how to manage the tires, and has more refined communication with the team. Hamilton, despite having unparalleled experience, is still calibrating Ferrari's real-time decision-making. That adaptation curve in Formula One is costly. Every 10th counts, every hesitation is penalizing. The most worrying thing for Ferrari isn't that Leclerc is performing well. That's great news. What's alarming is that Hamilton hasn't yet found his place. Because if Ferrari aspires to truly compete with Red Bull and McLaren, it needs both of its drivers to be at the highest level. Today, that parity doesn't exist. And until that changes, the team will continue to race with only one spear in the battle. Behind Charles Leclerc's podium finish and the SF25's increasing performance, there is the quiet but constant work of Ferrari's technical department. Jeddah wasn't a technological revolution for the Scuderia, but it did mark a strategic evolution in its way of interpreting the car and adapting it to the demands of the track. The modifications introduced weren't numerous, but they were precise enough to make a tangible difference. One of the most significant updates was the modification to the rear wing. Ferrari didn't present a completely new design, but rather a specific variation in the DRS flap cord. The objective was clear: to reduce aerodynamic drag when the system is closed, without compromising efficiency when activated. On a circuit like Jeddah, where long straights demand top speed but also stability under braking and high-speed cornering, this small modification represented a key improvement. It allowed for a better balance between downforce and efficiency, something that hadn't been fully achieved in Bahrain. The other major technical focus was the continuity in the use of the new surface introduced in the previous race. Although initial expectations pointed to a significant gain in Bahrain, this did not materialize in the time trials. However, in Saudi Arabia, the conditions were different. The smoother, less mechanically demanding layout allowed the surface to work more freely, favoring aerodynamic flow and providing stability in high-speed sections. Telemetry data confirmed that the downforce performed as projected, resulting in a more consistent car in the second stint of the race. Even so, Charles Leclerc's voice was critical. He acknowledged that the updates are working, but lamented that the competition has also progressed at the same pace. The improvements didn't bring them significantly closer to the leaders, which highlights an uncomfortable reality. Advancing is no longer enough. They have to evolve faster than the rest. Ferrari knows this, and that's why it continues to work on one of the SF25's structural problems: the lack of corner rotation, especially on slow entry points and in areas with aggressive direction changes. This defect forces drivers to compromise their line and modify their braking style, something Leclerc has managed to assimilate better than Hamilton. The Monegasque has adapted to the car, adjusting his driving style even at the expense of his natural style. Hamilton, on the other hand, is still in that learning and adaptation phase. Furthermore, the Maranello technicians have detected inconsistencies in the car's rear stability, especially in sectors where heavy braking is combined with prolonged turns. This unpredictable behavior takes a toll on driver confidence and remains a priority on the development plan for upcoming races. Ferrari's work is no longer based on drastic changes, but on fine-tuning. They're no longer trying to find a new concept, but rather fine-tuning the current one. What we saw in Jeddah was the result of a team beginning to better understand its car, understanding what works on which circuit, and, above all, what not to repeat in the future. Strategy in Formula One is a high-speed chess game. At the 2025 Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, Ferrari finally played with intelligence, precision, and, above all, a proper understanding of the race conditions. This time, the team not only designed an effective plan but also executed it flawlessly, something that hasn't always been the case for the Italian team in recent years. Jeddah, with its mix of fast corners, long straights, and aggressive braking zones, represents one of the biggest challenges of the calendar for tire management. Pirelli, aware of this demand, opted to run its softest compounds, C5, C4, and C3, which opened up the strategic range. According to the Italian supplier's predictions, the fastest option was to start on the medium tire and switch to the hard between laps 16 and 22. Ferrari chose that route and executed it with surgical precision. Charles Leclerc started on the medium tires and maintained a consistent pace, without overheating them excessively during the first stint. This management was crucial as it allowed him to extend the pit stop window just enough to benefit from a potential safety car, which ultimately didn't appear, but didn't require one. By switching to the hard compound, Leclerc maintained his competitive pace until the end of the race, withstanding the pressure of an up-and-coming Lando Norris. The key point was the way the Monegasque managed to preserve the performance of his tires in the final laps. While many competitors were experiencing a clear drop in their times, Leclerc was able to maintain a solid and consistent pace, which was crucial in consolidating his place on the podium. This efficient management was no coincidence. It's the result of a car that's beginning to take better care of its tires and of a driver who has learned to read the race beyond instant performance. Ferrari also opted for a clean stop, with no pit errors or unnecessary delays, demonstrating that the work on execution has also improved. In other seasons, details such as a slow stop or poor strategy communication cost them key positions. This time there was no room for error. The gap with the team's other car was also evident. Hamilton, despite using the same strategy in theory, didn't achieve the same performance. He suffered more from wear, especially in the second stint, and his pace was clearly inferior to Leclerc's. This once again highlighted that the Briton still lacks the same sensitivity as his teammate when interpreting the SF25's behavior under different fuel load and tire wear conditions. Ferrari's strategic result in Saudi Arabia was more than a good one-off decision. It represented a shift in the team's operational mindset. It was no longer just about reacting to what others were doing, but about taking the initiative, anticipating scenarios, and building the race lap by lap with control. That control, when combined with an evolving car and an inspired driver, can be the starting point for a new era. The 2025 Saudi Arabian Grand Prix wasn't just another race on the calendar. For Ferrari, it represented a statement of intent. After a season-opening season filled with doubts, questions, and criticism, the Italian team not only managed to get on the podium, but also sent a clear signal to the rest of the paddock. They are not willing to be left behind. Charles Leclerc was the central figure in this rebirth. His third-place finish wasn't a product of chance or outside errors, but the direct result of a combination of solid driving, a car that's beginning to respond, and sound strategic decisions. His ability to interpret the car, manage his tires, and maintain pace under pressure demonstrates a driver at the height of competitive maturity. In an increasingly unpredictable championship, Leclerc is proving he can lead a project under construction and keep it alive amidst the storm. Lewis Hamilton, meanwhile, remains a mystery. His talent is unquestionable, his experience an invaluable asset for Ferrari, but the connection with the SF25 is still lacking. The adaptation process is proving longer and more complex than expected. In an environment where tenths of a second separate glory from anonymity, this learning curve could cost him dearly, not only for him but also for the team's aspirations. From a technical standpoint, Ferrari is beginning to find answers. Aerodynamic modifications, optimized car setup, and cleaner performance on track are bearing fruit. But the gap with McLaren and Red Bull remains. It's shorter than before, but it still represents a barrier that cannot be ignored. The podium in Jeddah must be interpreted with precision. It's not a sign of dominance, nor a promise of championships. It's a turning point, a moment that marks the beginning of a new era, where the margin for error is minimal and the demands are maximum. The Maranello team must prove that this wasn't a one-off, but the beginning of a sustained trend. The upcoming races will be crucial. Ferrari needs to confirm that the performance shown in Saudi Arabia can be replicated on circuits with different characteristics, under less favorable conditions, and against rivals who are also evolving. Only then can they hope to re-enter the real fight for victories and even for the title if the trend continues. In the meantime, the team must continue fine-tuning every detail, from Hamilton's definitive integration into the car to the technical evolution of the SF25. Because if there's one thing Jeddah made clear, it's that Ferrari can no longer afford to make missteps. Every weekend counts. Every mistake counts.